All right. Welcome, everyone, to another Hacking Open Source Business podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Yankovic, once again joined by co-host Avi Press. And today we are joined by the one, the only, Patrick McFadin from DataStax and the Apache and the CNCF community. Like, he's everywhere. He's at all places. He's like omnipresent in the open source space. Patrick, what's going on?
I haven't found a foundation I didn't want to join. Yes, that's right.
Oh,
we're gonna. That's a great.
You got a new one for me?
Oh yes. We have some new ones for you to join.
That's great.
So Patrick. So it has been like 9 months since we last were on a podcast together, and so I've joined forces with Avi on this one. But if you have not listened to any of our episodes, have you listened to any of our episodes?
No, not yet. This is kind of new. Yeah, I got the link and I'm like, oh, perfect. Yeah, there's what Matt's doing. So I need to go catch up.
There you go. Okay. So what we do is we start with 173 random questions. And so we just throw them at you and see whatever you answer. And we just go with it. And then we'll talk about other real stuff.
This is not a training set. No, we're not doing that.
No, we're training our AI to be, chat Patrick.
God. See, this is why we should stop all research right now.
Yeah, we need a 6-month pause. Yeah. We need a 6-month pause.
Yeah, that's just to let me catch up. That's all that 6-month pause is for, is to let me catch up.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, Patrick, we're going to start with rapid fire questions.
Okay? Right.
And so, rapid fire questions, it's whatever the hell pops into my head. So, we're going to just start with your first Linux distribution.
Boy, what was it? I downloaded 24 floppy disks from somewhere in Sweden or Finland in 1991.
Ooh, okay.
So that OG.
Would have been. Well, so it could have been Red Hat, because Red Hat definitely was around then, but it could have been Slackware.
No, Slackware was my second distro, and Slackware was really nice. So I was working in a university, and it was in 92 that I was working in university, and we just downloaded whatever Linus was talking about because we were sick and tired of paying $10,000 for a Unix license.
Ooh, yeah. Which Unix license was it?
Well, we had SCO, of course, and AT&T Linux or Unix at the time. It was running on some ancient x86 hardware, some 386 servers that we had running, and of course all our Sun gear. We paid for Sonos, but that came pre-installed.
Well, so Avi, this might I don't know if you ever experienced this, but it used to be that they would charge you for that OS, right? So AIX, HPUX, all these. It would be like $50,000, $70,000 for the OS.
Yeah, that's so wild.
But it came with support.
So expensive.
Well, actually, the joke was you really don't care about the cost of the OS because the hardware is like $800,000, $900,000, which is an extra $50K, right? There were some pretty insane spends back then. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, being in a university, we were like, "Hey, we'll just build it ourselves." Some guy started. Let's go roll with that.
There you go, right?
Right.
mean, hey, that's always the best way to do it. So, as you started to get involved in that Linux space, and started to use it, what was your favorite early tool that you just kind of fell in love with?
Oh, in Unix land, in Linux land,
yeah.
Make.
Hey,
Fair.
Hey, if you're building stuff, you got to do it.
Oh my God.
You got to do it.
I was, VI and Make were like my mainstays for so long because every time we had random network cards and none of them, of course, there was no kernel support. So you had to build it all yourself. So yeah, I spent probably the first 2 years of Linux usage, hand editing C files to make our network cards work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But I'm sure you don't do that anymore, right? Like that's not part of your current day-to-day.
Makeup. No, not at all. No.
Okay,
But
fair
curl,
enough. So,
curl is awesome. I'll give you a little more
Curl
mainstream.
is awesome.
Curl is the best. Yes.
is curl your favorite tool, like right now, like open source tool?
It's one of my favorite open source tools of all time because I mean it just is so useful for everything I need to do. And I'm calling it out because you started me on this like command line Linux thing, so I'm gonna just like let's go OG, but still relevant today. It doesn't have to be AI. It doesn't have to be Kubernetes. Curl.
You know, that's funny because I just saw that Bloomberg put together like a technology, like grant for their engineers' favorite tools, and curl was one of them. So
it was on the list.
Yeah,
it's interesting to me that
too, right?
Yeah,
yes,
10 grand.
Yeah,
I
10
think.
grand. Yeah. But it's interesting that like there's other, there have been successor tools that have been, or, intending to be the curl successor that have been built. And some of them are pretty good, but they just don't catch on just like curl does. HTTP comes to mind is like quite a good tool actually, but I still use curl at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's built into the Mac now, you can just open a Mac fresh out of the factory. It's got the new Cupertino smell to it. And type curl, and it works.
It's there. Yeah.
Well,
it's there.
Okay. So, has anybody done the Cupertino air freshener for your car? I wonder if that's a thing. Can we get that? Apple, can we get that?
I think we should start a side business of that.
Cupertino smell. It's like, yeah.
No, you know the smell that I want is from the old Nintendo games. They always had that plasticky smell, which was somewhere between new car and like electronics.
Yeah, so. It was that injection molded plastic thing. Yeah.
So good. Good old days. So, speaking of the open source space, you mentioned Linus. Is there someone in that open source space that you look up to that you think is doing a good job or that you think is just awesome every time you hear speak? Except for me. I know you don't have to bring me up, but that's cool. Anybody else?
Well, I'm going to just shout out to coworker Sam Ramji. He's been like the unsung hero so many times for open source. He worked at Microsoft for years and helped bring them into the OSS world, which really seemed like this is a fiend task. Like, really? You're going to try to get Microsoft into open source? Good luck, bro. So yeah, he did all that, and he's still pretty active in the Linux Foundation, and so yeah, Sam Ramji, and he has a great open source podcast out there that talks about open source data. He's still doing it after 20 plus years. I just want to make sure that he gets acknowledged for that.
That's cool, right?
Super cool.
Yeah, consistency and longevity does matter.
It does, yeah. He was open source before. Well, not before open source was cool, but he was open source in enterprises before it was cool or even acceptable. There
you go. There you go. So, Patrick, what's your favorite conference like right now? Like, is there a conference that you just have to go to every year? Like, you're like, I got to go to that conference.
Well, it's funny because conferences are such a hot mess right now. I mean,
that's true.
We tried to do a Cassandra summit in March, and right on the heels of everyone, layoffs everywhere, and of course nobody could travel, so we had to move it to December. So this is a bad time to ask that. But the one that I do consistently go to, and I feel like it's a family reunion. And I'm going to pour one out for all the O'Reilly conferences because those were them, OzCon back in the day. But the latest, OzCon. The one that's still around, Day-to-Day Texas.
Day-to-Day Texas. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I have not gone to Day-to-Day Texas, have I? I don't think I have, which is unusual.
Matt, you should totally go. Avi, you should go. Both of you together.
When is it? I don't. Yeah.
We'll get in January.
Yeah, we'll
every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Good to know. Great.
Yeah, fair enough. So Patrick, if you're not working on open source, what are you working on nowadays? What are you doing? What are you doing with your free time?
Well, right now from a technology standpoint, I've gotten headfirst into Home Assistant, which is like the home automation software.
No,
let me just
not
warn
cool.
y'all. If you haven't done this, take stock. If you have way more free time than you think. It's a great idea. Go for it. But man, it is a rabbit hole because you just like, you start out, it's like the gateway drug is like, oh, I just want to have it so that the lights turn on when I walk into a room.
Yep.
And then it just keeps on going from there. It's like, can I play ambient music? Can I set the temperature? Can I?
No, it's crazy. Like my kids. Here's a use case example. My kids are horrible at like leaving things in the washing machine, and so I set up this whole automation routine so that if the washing machine stops, it will bug them until they move it into the dryer. It's amazing. I mean, I've automated
my girlfriend
my
doesn't hear
parenting.
this podcast.
Wow, that is spectacular. I wish that I would have thought of that years ago.
This is
really
the
good.
things you want to do as a software developer is solve problems that make me lazier. You know?
That's true. That is true. We'll have to get back to that laziness topic later on as we dig into some more technical stuff. But we've got a long list of questions to go. I don't know if you knew this, Avi, but Patrick and I share a similar interest in science fiction books.
Oh yeah,
Did not know that.
Yeah. In fact, I didn't wear my Skippy hat. It's downstairs, but I do have my
Skippy the
hat.
Magnificent.
Yeah. See, like, so my trust the awesomeness.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You know. So, Patrick, favorite book now? What are you reading, and what's keeping your interest?
Well, you know, I've got into the rock biography thing lately, especially on Audible, because I just finished the Bono book, and I'm reading or listening to the Dave Grohl book, you know, from Foo Fighters.
Oh, that's so good. The Dave Grohl book is so good.
I mean, I had my coming of age in the 80s as well, just like him. So we're almost the same age. So it's kind of fun to listen to his spin on it. But, you know, I went tech, he went music. I think he's doing better. But anyway,
no regrets.
It's no regrets at all. But I love the fact that, you know, you're like, why would I want to hear Bono talk? Man, that I'm going to listen to that again and again, because it's just, you find out that these are just people, and he's way more down to earth than you expect. And he even called it out. He's like, yeah, I can be a rock prima donna, but that's part of my shtick. But, you know, and Dave Grohl is probably the dude you could just hang out with and not even know he was a rock star.
He seems awesome.
Yeah, he's just so down to earth. Everything that I've seen, read, you know, like, you know, it's just, yeah, he's that down to earth guy, right?
Yeah. Like if you didn't have any idea, you lived under a rock and you met him, you would never know.
Yeah. So many great stories. I don't want to ruin it. You know, but there's some really good stuff in that book. You know, good choice. Highly recommend it. So speaking of rock stars, is there a celebrity that you know, who do people mistake you for celebrity wise?
Oh yeah. Well, Tom Arnold. I've been mistaken for Tom Arnold so many times.
Really?
I almost got a first class seat in Newark, New Jersey, because the gate agent was convinced I was Tom Arnold, and she was like, "It's okay." I said, "I'm not Tom Arnold." She's like, "It's okay. I understand. You want your privacy." And she walked me onto the plane and said, "Can we find a seat for Mr. Arnold?" And
you should have said
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, and they were like, "Oh, you know, we're all booked out in first class, but you know what? We can move you up into like the whatever it is, the expanded first, or the great economy." And they let me just sit down before they boarded the plane. And I was like,
wow.
Okay, it was just a weird situation.
Okay, so welcome to the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. Our guest, Tom Arnold, is on today.
Great.
Yeah, so I mean that's interesting. So if you or Tom Arnold is at a conference, and you know your love of music, you have to pick the song to walk up to the stage on. What song do you pick?
Oh wow, well that's a tough one. I one time I picked, and it was just a total troll, but it was so much fun. It was the theme from what was that movie? It wasn't Shaft. The Shaft theme.
Oh,
you know that
wow.
song?
That is such a good answer.
And it was only because David Duchovny doing the Shaft theme in the X-Files was like a transcendental experience. Because he was walking down like this dark hall, and it was super scary, and he started singing the theme to Shaft. I'm like, I want that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
that.
Ooh, I made
That's a
Matt
very good one.
speechless.
fair enough. I've never
Which
done
doesn't
that.
happen very often.
I
yeah,
have not done that. You know, I've been to. I think the wildest thing that I've done is, you know, I was at a wedding that did karaoke as part of like their, you know, their thing, and you know, I decided to sing "It's the End of the World as You Know It," which I thought was apropos. You know, but
excellent.
that was
A lot of words. Yeah. You got to know all
But
the
that's
words,
okay.
too.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what getting a little bit back towards the technical side, what are you using to edit code now? What's your code editor of choice?
VS Code, like the rest of the planet. I guess IntelliJ is the other answer, right? But yeah.
Everybody's doing VS Code. Everybody's
I'm doing VS Code.
level.
Yeah.
Avi's not. Avi's an Emacs person.
Space Max. I like Vim too. So don't before we get all up in arms at me. Yes, but I'm thinking of switching too. I feel like I'm gonna get left behind on all the AI tooling if I don't switch soon. Emacs and Vim are not keeping up with that.
That's true.
So far,
but Emacs, it's an operating system. No, it's an editor. No, it's both.
It is both. I'm so attached to org mode. I don't know how I'm going to live without org mode if I switch to VS Code is my one problem.
I feel like if you look in the VS Code marketplace, you'll probably find how to Emacs my VS Code, and all those things will be available. Yeah.
I check every couple months to look at what the org mode plugin is looking like. It's still kind of abandoned. It's so sad, but I will switch one day maybe, or maybe I'll just cling to Space Max forever.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
My brother.
Yes, you could
who
be the
writes
last
Fortran,
holdout, Avi.
You could
Yeah,
be.
maybe I'll just take the project over.
They'll write a movie about you called The Last Holdout.
Yeah, maybe The Last of Us.
My brother who
So
writes Fortran still uses Emacs, by the way. So just calling that out.
Very good.
There you go.
Very good.
So last question in the rapid fire mode here. So the craziest thing that you've done to promote Cassandra?
Oh, is this a softball question? You know the answer to this, don't you?
I don't.
So
Many of the listeners may not.
Maybe not. The craziest thing. So, as many people may or may not know, we'll just assume nobody knows that one of the primary features of Cassandra is its multi-data center capabilities and shared nothing. So you should be able to destroy anything inside a Cassandra cluster and it will still be working. I took that literally. And at one particular OzCon, I think it was in 2015, 2014, in our booth, we had a destroy a Raspberry Pi setup. So I had a Raspberry Pi cluster, Cassandra cluster using Raspberry Pis as the node. And then I had a selection of tools, hammers, drills, you name it, bolt cutters, whatever you want. And I invited people from the audience to come up and do whatever they wanted to a Raspberry Pi. Pick one and destroy it. And it was really out of control. As a matter of fact, we got in a bit of trouble with the staff at OzCon because they're just like, you guys are creating a scene. And I'm like, mission accomplished. But the thing that was really cool is we would have like an app running, like a little laptop with the app running. And then, here it is running out of this cluster you see in front of you. And somebody would take a hammer. You just get so violent. We had like a little Plexan shield go around. It was total Mythbusters thing. I had a lab coat. And they would just destroy this Raspberry Pi. A couple times we had a near fire because, electricity. And the app would still be running through this whole thing. And I bet you we probably got a lot of Cassandra users after that. Yeah.
What a great demo. What a great demo.
Yeah, we need to figure out something like that, Avi. Right? Like, break something.
Yeah, we need to follow in that. Yeah.
It's
all right, Patrick, you survived rapid fire. You
got to do the inner P.T. Barnum. That's the thing.
It's part of the DevRel role, right? It's rah, rah, rah. So, all right, Patrick, you've survived the rapid fire questions.
Congratulations.
Yeah, although there is something that I don't know if Avi knew. We and Patrick, we talk a lot about businesses, and businesses obviously, sometimes they get bootstrapped, sometimes they're funded by VCs. I don't know if you knew this, Avi, but Patrick's first computer was bootstrapped.
What does that mean?
So, Patrick, why don't you tell us how you paid for your first computer?
This isn't even a funny story anymore. It's just now you're just making it weird, Matt. Yeah,
I am not making it weird. Avi doesn't even
Matt
know.
always makes it weird.
we can count on that, huh? So no, I didn't have the money. This is like 1979. So computers were, as my dad called it, a fad. So I was kind of on my own. And I lived on a farm. I lived out in the middle of nowhere, way northern California. If you drive north of San Francisco and you get into the scariest part of California, that's where I lived. And the only choice I had was to figure it out. And the way I did it was I got into a pig breeding operation and started selling pigs and made a lot of money off of that. Yeah. And I bought an Atari 400 from that experience.
How many pigs was one Atari worth?
Oh, well, that's
a
thing.
valid question.
It's a valid question. If you do pig breeding, I mean, this is 1980, 79. So not much, but an Atari, I actually still have my original Atari and I still have my original receipt from that. And the whole thing cost $500, including a cassette tape reader, 16K Atari 400 and with a basic cartridge. So, I mean, that was quite a few, a lot. Yeah. But
wow, that's amazing. That is amazing.
See, that's a great bootstrap story for those looking to bootstrap your business. Why don't you just have, a side business of selling pigs? I think it's
I love the stories like this. There's the Airbnb story of like the founder selling cereal to kind of get them over the hump of the cash that they needed to just like make it another month. They were just selling like Obamas or something like that. It's great. I love those stories. Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
Fair enough. All right. Why don't we move on to something a little more technical, a little bit more related to Patrick's shirt today, which is, of course, the Apache Cassandra project. So what has been going on in the project lately, Patrick? Give us a little rundown on what's new and exciting.
Let's see, what's new and exciting? Well, I mean, we're getting ready to release Cassandra 5, and which is a pretty big milestone. As the story goes with open source, there's definitely eras, and we've gone through the eras of just the early days where it's just a few people contributing, and then a whole bunch of people contributed, and then there was this breakdown of trust and love, and it was the adolescent years. And I think as a project, we've moved beyond that. With Cassandra 4, it was clear that, all right, we're now mainstream database. We have some rigor, etc. Cassandra 5 is really cool because Apache Con last year, it was most of the committers. We were all there together, and there was some other folks. It was mostly like a project collection of project people. It wasn't like just base users. So people who contribute. But what was cool, it was like Apple, Bloomberg, Netflix, of course, DataStax, a few other smaller, like Microsoft, small companies like that, that we were all in the same room. There's about 40 of us, and it was like we were just all working at the same company. There was no lines like us and them, but the discussion that we had was like, wow, we've got something really special here, and it's because we never shipped a product that was based on a marketing deadline. We were shipping a product that solved our little individual problems that we agreed to, and we built something that actually solves a problem instead of looks awesome on a glossy. And there's other things that have suffered along the way, like there's absolutely no user interface. It's like you're on a command line. So there's that, but but what do you do with that? And that's where we're at, and I think we're getting into the more exciting phase of Cassandra, because we have ACID transactions and completely revamping the way we do distribution. It's just going to be really cool.
Now, it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of things, but one I want to jump to first is you talked a little bit about those kind of like growing pains, the adolescent years. You go through the different phases. And a lot of open source projects do that, where they start off and there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of contributors, and then, you know, certain things change, they evolve over time, and that kind of dwindles as those contributors who are really in it for the cool, you know, tech, or, you know, they have other things, they move on to other projects, and then you are left with a core group of people, and then you'll attract more people as the project gets stable who have an interest in the productionization or the long-term longevity of that particular product. That's a really difficult span for people, especially when people are looking at the number of contributors or the community as a metric on how fast their project is growing, or how they might be able to, gain interest in the market, place. So as you're going through that, was that like eye-opening to be like, where did all of our contributors go the first time you saw that? Or was it something that like hey, just everybody calm down, this is normal? Were you going through that phase where there were some people who were more concerned than others?
Yeah, well, then, this is the lifeblood of any open source project, contributors. Like, you don't want to just sit there and look in the Git and see that their last commit was a year ago. And you're right, there is a core, but I think it goes to a couple of things, especially around the fact that there are companies that are willing to participate, like the company itself. Like, Apple and Netflix are great examples. Huge companies, tons of engineering talent, but they're willing to let their engineering talent spend time on an open source project. Huge, right? If Apple or Netflix had one day said, "Oh, no, you can't work on that project," well, these are people who are employed at that place, and they couldn't work on the project anymore. So straight up acknowledgement, like, that is huge. Bloomberg is really good about contributing to open source and letting engineers spend time there. We were just talking about curl. They just contributed like $10,000. So yay that. But the contributor thing is something that we always have to keep in mind, though. And I think that becomes harder when you have a longer term mainstream project, because there's such a runway to get productive with a huge code base. So this is the downside of being around for a while. It's like when a new person comes to the project, they're like, ooh, it's like climbing Mount Everest.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
Did you find that early on the contributors who were coming to Cassandra were driving the adoption at their companies, or did that require some amount of marketing or selling on your behalf to actually get people to take a bet on a new database? I imagine that even if companies are struggling with a particular problem that like your database solves, you have this question of like, okay, well, who else is using it? Can we really trust this open source database that we don't know a whole lot about? How did you build that early momentum with corporate users?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. First is the early adopters, are they able to first talk about it? And that actually fueled a lot of the initial growth for Cassandra, because of the classic FOMO, the fear of missing out. This was like 2011, 2012. That there was a lot of choices out there. There was a lot of NoSQL databases. And in like the Cassandra adjacencies, there was Voldemort, there was React, there's Tokyo Cabinet. There's a lot of there are a lot of choices in there that you could make, and you're right. Like, am I going to make the wrong choice? But when you see the ones emerge, it's the oh, look, Netflix is talking about using Cassandra all the time. So the fear of missing out is like, I want to do that. But to your point about marketing, yeah. And I was working at DataStax, doing consultant. I was a consultant working on Cassandra implementations. That's all I did. And my boss, Billy, who was our CEO at DataStax, he's like, I think that we need to put a different kind of energy out there, and I want you to lead this effort. And that was when I created an evangelist team for Cassandra, and that was it. And we had a lot of fun, and it was just going out and doing meetups, doing conferences, and talking about it, and helping people understand it. And evangelism, eventually now is what we call developer advocates, but that was his thing. And so DataStax put money towards that function for good reason, right? But I think that we saw the most growth there because we funded the Cassandra Summit and stuff like that.
What's funny is, Patrick, is, that fear of missing out. Another point to Avi's, question there is a lot of times that fear of missing out makes people adopt it when they really shouldn't for certain use cases that you're like, why are you using this product for this? Like, what the heck are you doing? I'm sure, especially as a consultant, you might have gotten dropped into a few of those places where you're like, never would have thought anybody would have done this with that.
Yeah. Well, and that was what was really cool about just taking a turn at open source is you don't have to do the marketing slide. Like, this will solve all your wildest dreams and use this and, all your problems will go away. Some of my most popular talks that I would do were the ones where don't do this, like what not to do. And 5 ways you'll fail. It was like, these are like a little negative, a little down, but man, they were always packed because people wanted to hear the reality. Like, if you're running Hadoop, don't think that you're going to use Cassandra because they're different, or, it's like that kind of stuff. And I think there was an appreciation that, thanks for the real talk, because there were people trying and they were failing. So I feel like that was really important. That's where truthiness in an open source project is really helpful.
Yeah, Matt does a talk on destroying open source communities that is very good, and I think that it's a great theme for talks. Just how to do the negative thing. Yeah. Matt's got the hat and everything.
Got the hat for the talk.
Of course you do.
So I'm curious. Like we see a lot of startups nowadays that are trying to build new databases and commercializing open source. There's so many problems that can be tackled in the database space, and I think that it's a really great example of what other companies should and should not do in trying to commercialize an open source database. I'm curious, do you have any things that you see commonly a lot of these companies doing wrong or doing specifically right that that you've seen from working on Cassandra and at DataStax?
Oh God, there's the list of sins. It's probably in Matt's talk about how to destroy an open source community. I mean, I think this is any company. DataStax is not immune to any of this. No company is. I have never seen a company nail this because it's just not human nature. But it's like, wow, everyone's using it. Quick, let's commercialize the hell out of this thing. And then pure panic. Oh my God, no one's going to pay us money. It's just going to be free software out there, like a floppy disk in the mail, like the AOL disk back in the day. Like we're going to fail. And then, so the result of that panic is usually like some really bad choices for open source licenses, open source-ish, like BSL, like, or, I mean, yeah. I mean, I remember, sidebar on BSL, Monty Vidness from MariaDB, he and I used to talk all the time at OSCON, and he was dreaming up BSL, and he's like, hey, the Cassandra project, you ought to think about this. And he and I debated it quite a bit, and I just like, what, it's so complicated. If I need a lawyer to understand my open source license, then no. And so we just agreed to disagree. And but that's Monty's thing. He's very good at he's going out and debating, and I always enjoyed debating with Monty. But he did it, and so that exists. But then there's other the bigger controversies, like what happened with Elastic. Like, what happened? Well, also Amazon was like OpenSearch, and it didn't work out the way you expected. We've gone through this with the Apache Cassandra project, and Apache license is, if it doesn't hurt or it doesn't make you second guess, and you're probably not doing open source right.
So, Patrick, I do have a follow-up question on your Monty discussions. How much vodka did you drink, and how often did you end up under the table?
I didn't. I made it a point to never drink with Monty. I had.
Oh, how did you get away with that? He made everybody drink that black vodka. Oh,
because we always did it in OzCon.
So
I know.
I was actually at a conference talk, and I was at a panel with him, and he brought the vodka out on the panel and made all the panelists drink.
Yeah. Boy, my liver said no. But I know that the Monty story with this vodka is world famous. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
So, okay, let me ask you this. I know, like you mentioned, another thing about Cassandra that's coming out is transactions. I know, like, a big feature recently was, I think it's called Guardrails, right? Which is a way to help automate and keep your configuration properly set up and tuned to avoid common mistakes. Is that correct? If I got that right?
Yeah, this was a classic. Hey, we're solving a problem that sucks for us, and we're going to open source it. Yeah, so Guardrails was that. We actually built it for when we were building Astra, our Cassandra as a service, because we're finding out quickly that when you give anybody access to a cloud version of Cassandra and just let them go for it, there's a whole lot of YOLO going on that you can't support. So we implemented this. We started implementing this idea of Guardrails, which is it just puts these reasonable boundaries around things and that's been kind of a thing with Cassandra. It's like, you can do anything you want and just run it into the ground. It will hang on to the very last second and do whatever you ask and just destroy itself. So it actually it turned out to be like one of those things since we've open sourced, put all the code in. Like Netflix just did a big talk about it, like basically like how this saves our lives. Yeah, like we are all the people who are on pager rotation are like loving this feature. It's their favorite thing. And this is Netflix.
Oh, that's cool.
They have like top engineers, so I hear, but they still suffer the same problems, So it's really cool to see that kind of thing happen. Yeah.
Well, so that's an interesting question because, so one of the things that I have heard and I've talked to and I debated with some different folks in the last 6 months about is a lot of the technology that we're building, especially in the open source space, is either derivative works or it's designed to solve, augment, automate existing projects, make them easier, which is all great and everything. But there's an argument that, we're having to do this because either there's not enough talent or we're just all getting dumber from, whatever, mechanisms happening, or, the fact that there's just so much to do and we can't keep up with it. But are we losing some of that innovation? Because a lot of the innovation, a lot of the new things, even in the database space, it tends to be the quote unquote build on the shoulders of the giants who came before us as opposed to net new things. And there's a lot of people who say, you're an idiot if you ever build your own database nowadays because there's so many great databases out there. You might as well just start with fill in the blank and then augment it until it's something completely different.
Yeah, it seems, I think the time frames I've heard is like, it seems like every 10 years we just reinvent everything. And it's like, oh yeah, we need a new thing, except for curl. Apparently curl is like everlasting, right? So good job. But in my Kubernetes work on the Kubernetes side of my brain, I've been involved in quite a few talks and then other folks that are inside the Kubernetes community where I think the really strong message is I think we can stop inventing things now. And the reason I say that is, of course, we need to reinvent. We always need to invent things, but stop reinventing things and start thinking about how we assemble them. Like we're moving into a different era. Do we need 17 different choices for a database, or do we need a better way to deploy it in a cloud native way? And now it's like, instead of reinventing the basic, let's invent better architectures and deployment methodologies.
Yeah, so it's inventing new things, just not reinventing the things that are already there. So just reuse what's there, but look for new ways, new opportunities to maybe do something completely different.
It's an invitation to try something different instead of just reinventing things. But and part of that is the innovation cycle inside. It will spur more innovation in the MySQL space. Look at what there's projects like PlanetScale is doing a lot of innovation with MySQL, making it cloud native. There's a Cassandra project. We're doing a lot with Cassandra, making it cloud native. TIDB, they're doing a lot of innovation work around making databases cloud native. And they're actually, I love Ed, and you should talk to Ed if you haven't, Ed Wang at TIDB. But
oh yeah,
he's embodied this idea of assembly and created like an assembly of good things that are open sourced into a single open source project. And it's really this cool derivative thing where I feel like when he and I talk, he's always like, oh, I just want to bring in the best, the greatest hits, create like a mixtape. There's still plenty of innovation and a lot of code that needs to be written, but it doesn't mean you have to reinvent a consensus algorithm.
Okay, here's maybe a dumb question, but when we say we want to make this tool, this database, this product more cloud native, what do we mean by that? I assume a lot of people running Cassandra, other things are already not on-prem. Maybe they are, but a lot of times they're not. What does it mean that we're going to make it more cloud native?
That's a great question. Almost another softball.
This was not planned.
Not planned.
No, yeah.
Funny, I wrote a whole book about that. Available at Amazon and booksellers everywhere. No, the idea of cloud native database, especially, is moving away from my product, my thing can run on Kubernetes, but what if it ran in Kubernetes? Which means that now we can rethink things like, oh, there's probably a lot of duplication of effort going on here. Like a control plane in Kubernetes can do a lot of things. Do I need to have 2 control planes? Or can I reduce the amount of code that I'm running? And it comes down to really one thing, is separating compute, network, and storage into its components and letting those scale elastically any way you need. And traditional database installation was monolithic. When you install a database, it's the database and you manage it by yourself. You have DBAs and you do all this stuff. Well, if you don't need a DBA, then what's the choice in a cloud native world? SREs. You just need to have SREs that manage the whole thing top down. And they don't need to be specialists with databases. They need to be specialists in deploying cloud native. And so how do we rebuild parts of the database to make their lives easier?
That's a great answer.
Avi was buying your book there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. An order will come in a sec. I just feel like that's one of those phrases that people throw around a lot, and they mean a lot of different things when they say that. But that, I think, the duplication of work, pushing more of that stuff into Kubernetes, I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe is a good segue into talking about your role within the CNCF, within the Apache Foundation. Like what are you working on in what is your primary focus within those foundations? And I'm curious, like what are the biggest kind of challenges that you're working on there?
Well, in ASF, I mean, as everyone probably knows, ASF is a fiefdom, right? It's the real power and importance is in the project, so each project is an independent thing that, but the overall ASF is just a governing body that makes sure that the bylaws and everything are handled. But the real product or project governance is inside the project management committee. I'm a committer on Cassandra, so I get to contribute things in that way. But right now, my particular effort, and this is kind of funny, is I'm running the marketing and promotion group inside of the Cassandra project. So like working together with other companies that support Cassandra to like work together. And so we do a monthly, we do two times a month, but it's monthly for different time zones, or just a marketing working group that we lay down our arms and all get together and talk about like what's best for the project. So that do a lot of that. And we have a planetcassandra.org, which is our centralized hub for nonpartisan information for Cassandra. And, so it's that just trying to really hard to make sure that works. Um, on the CNCF side, well, not even a CNCF mainstream project, but thing that I do a lot of work with is a data on Kubernetes community. And I just helped finish a white paper that's going to be presented next week at KubeCon EU on running data on Kubernetes. So yeah, I feel like that topic is a really important one for future people. Like if my kids are running anything, or doing any engineering work, I'd really hate for them to install software on a command line. Yeah. So I'm working towards
come on. That's good quality character building activities, Patrick. I mean, don't you want your kids? It's like having them go shovel, snow outside, or clean up the leaves in the yard. It builds character.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, but yeah, they get plenty of character trying to figure out how to write a JavaScript app. Yeah, that's true. Well, they're all just using ChatGPT anyway, so who cares?
Well, yeah, that's a whole other thing, right?
You write JavaScript by hand? Wow, you must have so much character.
I told my son, who's 15, I was like, here's a new job for you, prompt engineer. Yeah.
So let me ask you, specifically on pick your poison, your experience. You've worked across a lot of different foundations projects. Working from a commercial entity and also working as a project that deals with commercial entities, what are some of the challenges, that kind of overlap those two? Because obviously there's sometimes competing priorities between the two. How do you, as a member, but also as someone who, works at a company, how do you navigate that and make sure that everything works, well together?
First thing you have to be okay with is somebody's going to be pissed off at you. At no point in your life will you be like in this utopia of happiness, because someone's going to be pissed off because you biased something in one direction, either commercially or open source. You got to be, it's like working in a call center. You just be ready for abuse. The second thing, which I think is a little more positive, is open source software is really the foundation is the human connection, and building up those human connections and having a really good network of friends. And it's always this thing of we can build a trust relationship between a group of humans first, and that makes those other conversations easier. So I don't get side eye when I say, hey, we should go do something like this. Like there's a trust relationship. Now maybe they're like, well, that seems a little commercial, or maybe you're biasing too much on the open source side. Great, we can have that conversation without throwing knives at each other. But boy, that has been a cornerstone of all my work.
So I think that's a really great point. I'm curious in an open source context where you just probably have a lot of people that are in a lot of different places and a lot of asynchronous communication is happening. I think that getting people together to, go to a talk or have a beer or do all these things in person can be a really, really effective way to build that kind of trust, get everyone aligned. But how do you do that effectively in a context where that's not always feasible to do? Especially pandemic times, especially in open source where this is just kind of default the case. How do you think about building that kind of very authentic trust in your team early without flying people all over the world to get together?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important aspects of trust relationships is time. You don't build a trust relationship with somebody in a week, or one conference. You may get a good connection with somebody, like, oh, we were able to hang out, cool. But you have to be willing to put in the time and consistency for a relationship, like a trust relationship to build. And I don't remember who said it, but I'm not the originator, which is trust is currency. you trade that currency of trust. And with an open source project, there's a lot of people on the Cassandra project I've never met in person. But I really have a good, strong trust relationship because we've had 10 years of working on the same stuff. And I know their motivations and can trust those just based on a long history of working together. But there are ways to make things work. I've done Zoom as your friend. I know it's hard to work with, but it's amazing that it's just so cool that I can get on, like, wake up in the morning, have a quick conversation with somebody in Finland, and then later in the day have a conversation with somebody in New Zealand face to face. What a time to be alive,
Yeah. Yeah, we take it for granted sometimes.
We do.
We ought not to.
But yeah, there are a lot of ways to build. I think a long time ago, it was in a book that I helped write on DevRel. I said, some of the most important relationships I've had in my career were started on a keyboard.
That's the society we live in now, though, right? It's just natural. It's more natural for my daughter to be, disconnected and virtual than it is to be in person.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. We could do it. It's doable. Yeah. But, that's another thing too, is that, social media is a really good way to break trust relationships because it doesn't really create those kind of relationships. It creates everything in social media is about short bites and getting attention. And Twitter used to have kind of this underground vibe, but it was still that, it was still like people like throwing out hot takes and, doing all that stuff. And it was never a place where I can't think of any social media where I'm like, oh, I built some really great relationships with people here. Never. So I think once we admit that, even LinkedIn is a great place to get a connection, but it's not like you're building any relationships there. Yeah.
I would agree with that. I guess we are running a little low on time now, but I think, Matt, you had one question to wrap up.
So, the other hat that you wear, obviously, Patrick, is, the DevRel hat. And so, obviously, before I delve into my, kind of point here, how do you and does your team define DevRel? Because, that is like one of those words that can take on a lot of meanings depending on the department and the company that you work for. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, like from a DevRel perspective, what's your take on, your framework or what areas you focus on?
Yeah, DevRel, sure, I can talk about this for another hour if you want, but I'll keep it concise. DevRel is a cross-purpose practice where you're looking at various aspects. So the three aspects that I primarily focus on, there are usually four in DevRel, which include product, but primarily what I focus on is outreach, community, and education. Those are three core areas of DevRel that are important for what I do. And the people that work inside those can cross over a lot of times, and usually they do. And that's why we try to put it into one little burrito of DevRel. Because the education people are involved in outreach. They're involved in community. People who do outreach are involved in community. So, you're not just playing one game. You're playing multiple games that cross over, but a lot of focus is put on each area. So outreach would be events. Education is like online learning or YouTube. And then community is about, community management and getting to know people, building trust relationships. Yeah. So that's how I feel DevRel fits into my world. Yeah.
So, out of curiosity, because I am wearing the official metrics hat.
Yes.
How do you measure DevRel?
I have a lot of measurements that I run. But
what are your top five? Tell me what you look at on a regular basis, or what are the most meaningful?
The most meaningful are mostly around engagement metrics, like how many people show up to an event, how many people engage with your content. Because you're building content for people to use. You should measure that. Are they using it? And usually that helps a lot. Like, oh, this didn't quite hit. This one did. Okay, so this is what the community is interested in. Okay, we can make a choice there. Other metrics that I think are important are around the community, which is like how many community contributed articles are there? I mean, that is, without that, your community is going to die. It's just going to wither. And so we look at how many contributed articles there are, how many posted use cases, that sort of thing. Engagement levels there. So those are my two easy hot buckets. I mean, there's a lot of metrics inside those, but those are two that I think, without getting overwhelming with this data dump, I think those are really two that you should always consider.
So when starting out, and a lot of the audience that we have is startups. They might be smaller companies. They're looking to build that community from the ground up. Anything that they should focus on early on, because they might not have the audience. So they might be talking to 50 people, right? Online, right? So, oh, look, 50 people read this article. This is, twice as many as the last time. Any sort of advice for those folks who are just getting started to building out their community and trying to make a go of, some sort of project?
Yes. Always start out with the idea that everything you provide is without a transaction. So you're not asking, here, if I give you some education, you'll give me something. Never start with a transaction. You will get value from your community later on. Don't lose sight of that. This is, and Jono, if you're listening, I'm using your words. This is the thing. It's like, when you have you have your outreach and your awareness, but when you get that new user, don't think that once you have a user that now this is like a source for all new content. No, that will evolve. But just getting out of this idea that every community member is a transaction is such a good thing, because you will run people off so fast. When you're like, oh, I saw you clicked a link. Would you like to do 6 use cases and fill out a blog and do all this? Like, get away from me. Just think about that. And the number 2 thing is get out there and make friends. Go to conferences, go to meetups. You don't even have to create meetups. Go to ones that are already created. Make some friends.
Yeah, networking is so critically important. It really is.
And so underrated. Highly rated and still underrated.
Yeah,
consistently. Yeah.
Well, Patrick, thank you for showing up and chatting with us today. We really do appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
Always great to catch up, and we hope to see you at an upcoming conference.
Yeah, where we can network.
There we go. All right. Until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone.